In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of body work. For those who don't know, I got my start as a business owner back in 2006 doing competitive hot rod body work and fabrication. So since then, there's a lot of things that I've learned, a lot of things that have proven to be successful or not successful. And I want to show you some of those things on this Speedster Turtledeck because this fiberglass piece I had laying flat, and I'm talking for months, and it flattened out in some areas and it got a different curve in some others. And then when I went to bond on the Turtledeck to the actual inner structure, which you could kind of see there through the fiberglass, that changed the shape a little bit too. So what I'm seeing on this deck lid, or a deck lid, you can see I'm coming from the hot rod world. What I'm seeing on this baggage door is I've got a nice gap there. All right, I've already worked everything to roughly 3/32 of a gap all the way around. But what you're going to see is it doesn't sit quite flush in some areas. Back here's the worst of it. We just want to get this thing looking good and in the air. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how to take care of that. We'll use a little bit of photos, we'll use a little bit of video. You can see, again, it's high here, the door is. It's level here, and it's high here again. And then down here it's actually sucking in, but that's because I don't have anything behind the Zeus fasteners pushing it back out, and the door's not actually adjusted for that yet. As you can see, I've already sanded the deck lid. I keep saying that. I've sanded the Turtledeck with 80 grit. I've taken care of a few areas I didn't like already, just really minor stuff. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and build up this in certain areas and this in others. A little bit of back and forth, and I'll show you how to do that starting right now. You can see here I put a little bit of tape on the edge of the Turtledeck, and then I folded it back over the baggage hatch and taped it down flat. Right now we're only worried about building the Turtledeck up on its low spots. We'll worry about the baggage hatch low spots after we get the Turtledeck built up. So the idea behind this tape is to keep body filler out of that gap, at least the best we can. If it tears, if the tape tears or something like that, we don't really care if there's a little bit of putty in there, but we want to keep out as much as we can. So what we're going to do is, using a big putty spreader, the one I use is probably, I'm going to use a 6-inch one on the back here. We're going to go ahead and build up the putty. Now when we build it up, the more artfully I spread that putty, the better it's going to sand. Okay, let me move this airplane a little bit. So when I spread it, I'm going to try and spread it evenly, smooth. I want to sand as little as possible, all right? Now, if I find out that the putty is too chunky, too thick I should say, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and thin it out with a little bit of fiberglass resin, and what that'll do is make it a little bit glossier, a little bit glassier, a little bit smoother. It'll make the putty lay down a little bit slicker. The danger in that, of course, is that the fiberglass resin is going to make it harder to sand. So it's kind of a balancing act. So I'm going to go ahead and spread a little bit of putty now, and you'll see exactly how I do that here in a minute. Here's the body filler I'm using. I've got about a 5-inch by 5-inch blob there. It's mixed a little bit on the hot side, but it's a little cooler today here in the shop. My spreader, my putty spreader, looks like an absolute mess, but it's actually on its edge sanded nice and smooth, so I get nice spreading on this. So anytime you spread putty, you of course want to make sure that you're spreading it, or sorry, mixing it. Anytime you mix it, you want to mix it like you're spreading it. Okay, so I'm going to continue doing this. I'll be careful not to induce any bubbles into it. I'm going to continue to mix this until it's a consistent color, and then I'll spread it, and then after that I'll show you how that looks. So if you're paying attention, you realize what I did here. I had a low spot on the Turtledeck I needed to fill here, and a low spot down here. So why did I fill more than I needed to fill? I also went back quite a ways. I went back, it's about 2.5 feet from this point to the baggage door. Here's the reasoning. First off, I don't want to fill just this little area and get a sharp whoop dealy. All right, same here. That's why I went so far back. But why did I fill even the spots I didn't need to fill? First off, this is deceivingly thin. Okay, there's not a lot of material here, not a lot of putty on this. So the putty here is thicker than it is here, and it's thicker than it is here. Anytime you spread putty and you let it cure, you get these little hard edges. All right. Now, it looks a lot worse on the camera than it actually is. That's going to do what we call feathering out. That's going to feather out really nicely when I sand it. However, if I tried to get a build up here and then no build up here and then a build up here, I would have had a hard edge somewhere in here where I didn't spread any of the putty. Now, because the fiberglass is a different hardness than the putty, what's going to happen is I'm not going to get a nice feathering of this edge here, all right? So I would rather skim that. That's what we call it when we apply the putty. I would rather skim that real thin and then sand it back off, all right? So this putty, again, is deceivingly thin. It's not as thick as it looks. Some of you are going to be like, well, if it's an airplane, you shouldn't be adding all that weight to the Turtledeck. 99% of this is going to end up on the floor. Okay, maybe not 99, but a good chunk of it. A good chunk of this putty is going to end up on the floor in the form of dust. And again, this is a very small amount of putty. I don't recall what a gallon of this stuff weighs. I want to say it's probably about 5 pounds, 6 pounds. And I'm not even going to tap into just a small fraction, but a small fraction of that weight. So we're not really adding a whole lot of weight here. But what we're doing is we're giving this thing a really nice show quality for an airplane type of baggage door. So you'll notice here, if you can imagine that this tape isn't here, you'll see that we're much more level going across the two. I'm being very, very careful not to touch this. Don't go, oh, is it dry yet? And put your finger in it, okay? First off, it doesn't actually dry. It cures. And I can touch the gooey stuff on the tape, and clearly it's not ready yet. Another thing, I said that you could thin this out with fiberglass resin. That is true. I didn't have to do it on this. But if you have to do it on yours, make sure that you're using a polyester resin. If you're using an epoxy resin, you're just asking for trouble, all right? It has to be a polyester resin, and not a lot at that. So, and truthfully, if you're doing this the right way and you're equipped well enough, you're going to be using a skimming glaze. It's a little bit different than this body filler. Same general chemical composition. Just it's a lot thinner and it spreads a lot nicer. And actually, we may end up using that after we do this once. All right. Sometimes it's better to skim this a few times. And again, you don't want to be building it up in those skims. All right. I'm going to show you how to sand this here in a little bit. But essentially, what it's going to boil down to is if I start sanding this thing and I'm happy with this here, and I'm happy with the adjacent areas, but I'm starting to get fiberglass showing through, that means I need to stop and really reconsider, is it truly smooth? All right, we're going to show you how to feel if it's smooth as well. And I shouldn't even say smooth. There's a difference between smooth and straight. So what we're after is straight and smooth. This is almost done here. I can touch it. It's a little bit sticky still. You can see I've pulled the tape off so I can see what I'm working with. Again, a lot better across the top here. I will be sanding onto the baggage door. The baggage door is painted right now. We painted this thing real quick for Oshkosh last year, and we were screaming through it. And honestly, it didn't turn out very good. So we uncovered the airplane. We're going to redo it. That's why the baggage door is already red. You can see up here when I pulled the tape, I pulled it a little too soon and it peeled back, so I'm going to have to take care of that. This is the block we're using. It's about 16 inches long or so. Always use the longest block for the job with a little bit of room for the back and forth motion. You can see that that takes up most of what it is that we're going to be sanding here. Down in here I'll be using a combination of the block I just showed you plus what we call a teardrop block. It's got about a 1-inch radius on it, on one end. So it's round, and that round will fit nice into this concave. Again, as you saw in another video, you don't want to sand like this ever, whether it's a round block or a flat block, but especially a round block. You always want to go in an X pattern, do a couple strokes that way, and then come back in, do a couple strokes this way, okay? It's really easy to run a groove into body filler. And you can see I was dragging my finger on there and it's leaving a mark. That's because the outer surface is not yet cured. We don't want to start sanding this prematurely. All that does is it gums up your sandpaper. I might do something like that if these ridges in the putty were awful tall, but they're really not. They're pretty small. So I'm going to let this cure out fully. That way it turns into a nice powder when I sand it. I started sanding this thing with 80 grit. We're going to leave enough of this on here that I could finish it with 150 grit before primer. I may even take it down to 220 grit. If you use anything coarser than 150, again at the coarsest, you'll see the primer shrinking into these little scratches here. I'm sure you can't see, those lighting is terrible today. But what you can see is I'm starting to get, and this is because I honestly haven't sanded this all the way yet. I'm just trying to make a demonstration out of this, but you can see I'm getting low spots here. I'm going to continue sanding those out. One thing that you want to do, you'll see people feeling with their fingertips, right? Oh man, that doesn't feel straight at all. Or worse yet, oh, it actually does feel straight. But guess what? It's not. All right. So what you want to do, wear a glove or use a towel, something to distract you from texture changes. Keep your fingers together. Go nice and slow. Use your left hand, both directions. Use your right hand both directions. And maybe even close your eyes to remove all distractions. But what you're trying to see is if your fingers can feel any high spots or low spots. All right, remember, you could sand out a high spot, you can't sand out a low spot. And sometimes you might think that you have a low spot here when actually it's a high spot. We're pretending that the fiberglass is showing. If the fiberglass is showing here, it could be a high spot or a low spot. Okay, you're going to have to rely on your hands to tell you what it is. Now, on the Speedster here, we want to make sure that this thing is nice and straight going this way and somewhat straight going this way. Because this is such a sharp curve, and you're also looking at it this way, you're not going to be able to catch a line on it, a light line, like you can going this way. All right, so this way is far more critical. Now, if I didn't do a good job sanding, spreading this putty, what I would do is block it about halfway first, perpendicular to the direction I want to finish in, and then I would finish it the rest of the way parallel the direction I want to finish it in. So, but this spreaded pretty smoothly. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to sand this. By the time I'm done, I expect we're going to be seeing a little bit of translucency here down to the fiberglass. We'll have a build up here, and we'll have a build up here. And then of course I'll show you what a good feathered in edge looks like. And actually this is a pretty good area to see right here. See that edge? That edge is starting to feather in. Okay, what that means is that you can see a transition, a very smooth transition from that putty into the fiberglass versus here, right next to it, you know, that's still a hard edge. Okay, this is what we want to see. Now, if you sand this smooth and you just keep getting hard edges, that means you didn't sand your substrate, in this case the fiberglass, well enough before you spread the putty. And all your putty is doing is it's coming off. So you want to make sure that you're getting really nice feathered edges here. Okay, so we're going to continue to sand this. You're going to see that this is feathered, this is feathered. Edges down here and up here will be feathered. Build up. Probably no build up, or maybe some translucency, and then build up. All right, so you'll see I'm getting a little bit of translucency here now. That's the fiberglass showing. I do not want to keep sanding that. If I keep sanding that, I'm going to cut into the fiberglass. You can see also that the block hasn't even been hitting this part of the hatch. Okay, that means that the hatch right here needs built up. All right, so I'm going to stop here. That's good enough for now. I'm going to continue on with this other stuff. And then what we'll do is once this whole turtle deck is sanded smooth and straight, we'll come back in and then we'll worry about the hatch separately. It's kind of its own little project, okay? Don't take too big of a bite at a time. All right, so I'm going to be aware of that, and I'm going to continue moving forward. You can see the nice feathered edges coming out here. Okay, so I sanded a little bit more. You can see I'm getting translucency here, here, and here. All right. You can tell by looking at this that there's actually a little bit of a high spot right in between these two patches. I'm not worried about that. Again, that high spot's going this way, not this way. And I have to sand this through 150 grit anyway. You can see down here I'm already starting to cut into the hatch door. So I am not going to continue sanding this anymore because then I'll make that into a low spot. One other thing that I did not plan for, and you can see these nice feathered edges, there's a structure in here and minute flexing in the fiberglass here, and I'm talking tiny, okay? But what that's doing is when I'm pushing down on the block, it's causing this to dip, and it's going to cause a high spot here, and it's going to cause me to sand into the fiberglass. I don't want to do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is stop. I know this is a little wonky right now. I'm going to stop here, okay, at this section. What I'm going to do is once this is all sanded nice and smooth for 80 grit, I'm going to go ahead and glaze this whole thing with a glaze, not with the lightweight body filler, but a glaze. I'm going to take the glaze all the way back past this point, and I'll probably stop it right around here. I'll be adding more glaze than I need, of course. It's going to sand off. But what that's going to do is it's going to help me get a nice flat edge across this structure here. So, and I'm not too worried about this structure here because again, you'd be looking that way to see any defect there, and you can't see around a curve. All right, so I'm not going to worry too much about this structure going down the middle. Once I get this all sanded, what I'm going to do then is I'll come back to the hatch, and I'll show you how we deal with that, because the hatch still has, you can see it, the hatch still has its low spots, all right? And those low spots need to be brought up to the turtle deck. All right, so we'll look at that here in a little bit. I ended the last segment of the turtle deck bodywork, building up these areas here that were low. Actually, it's it's been a while since I've done it. I found out that I did not have to bodywork the baggage hatch at all to match the turtle deck, because, and you can see it's a little low right now, if I add a shim, a 16th inch shim underneath the rubber in here in the baggage area, it'll bring that up. And it'll also tighten up this gap that we have through here as we bring it up. So let's see if I can do this here single-handed. There's our baggage hatch. What we'll do is we will put some rubber shims underneath, probably that rubber there and maybe that rubber. But what it'll do, again, we'll shim it here where it's low. Here where it's low, it's going to suck this nice and tight up here, and then it'll bring this level. So let's go ahead and do that real quick and see what we end up with. Okay, I added some little rubber shims underneath the rubber seal that goes on the baggage hatch. Those shims are 16th inch thick, so not very thick. You can see that it took care of this area here. It's nice and flush now going across. It closed up this gap here, so it feels better. As you can see, we still have a high spot from about this point in to there. Okay, you can see that high spot there. And what that is, because I feel a high spot here too, and when I say high spot, I mean on the turtle deck itself. The baggage hatch actually needs to come up. Because I know that it's not just this, it's also in here, we can shim this up on the hinge itself. Okay, so if we shim this up on the hinge itself, but when I say this, I mean when we shim the hatch up a 16th of an inch, it's going to take care of this, and it's going to take care of this to about here where the curve starts to be its own separate issue, which again, we have that figured out. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then by the time that's all said and done, this is going to be fitting properly. You can see that the other side's already fitting really nicely. And then of course it's going to carry into a nice slick look across the whole turtle deck.